Step 1, installation of the bottom track. So we're actually going to start by placing our upstand track into our opening. We're going to want to make sure that our upstand track is center lined into the opening. So that means that you've got your 1/2 inch on one side and your 1/2 inch on the other side. You need to make sure that the track itself, if you're going to work with the exterior of the system, that it's fixated on the edge of the bottom ledge and would be the same on the other side. Things to look for not to do with the bottom track is you can't have the track itself leaning over. The track has to be supported. Where this is a bottom weighted track, it needs to be made sure that it's under some support and it can't overhang on the edge. Because if it was to be fixated here, the panels would tilt and the track would move. So you need to make sure that you're always covered onto the system itself. Today we're actually going to center it into the opening. So I'm going to center it directly into the middle of the opening from 1/2 inch on this side and 1/2 inch on this side. Once I've put my track into the system where I think it's nice and center lined, I'm going to mark off with a pencil exactly where my track's going to sit on both sides. That way I have a placement for my track. Before we get started in screwing down the track system, this is when you would like to flash your system. Sill pan would be required. On the sides you would need flashing, top and bottom, and on this side as well, maybe a flashing or a paper flashing. With the actual track itself, on both sides of the track, you'll have an end cap. Okay, so you'll have an end cap on one side and an end cap on the other side. There is 2 stainless steel screws either side of the system. And we're going to start off by removing those screws. So with a Phillips drill, we're going to take out both screws. And then we're going to pop off the end cap. Then we'll repeat the process on the other side. Now the reason why we take off the end caps now is because we're going to assemble the frame. The best way to assemble the frame is to actually not put the whole frame together, because it's a very difficult process to be moving a whole system. So we're actually going to be individually installing the system one by one. Bottom track, side jam, then top track. It's a lot easier to work with, a lot easier to level, and a lot easier to move around. So we're actually going to take off on both of the jam systems. The jam connectors, we'll be removing those. Again, 2 stainless steel screws on the top, 2 stainless steel screws in the bottom. Make sure you keep your screws to one side and you do not lose these. While you're here, you might as well take off the top. You can place those to one side. Now for the swing door jam. Once you've removed, put the jams aside. Now we take the bottom, again, bottom jam connectors, and we're going to place into the track on both sides. Before putting back on your end caps, this is when you're going to want to seal the bottom track. So I'm going to show you exactly where we're going to put the sealant on the bottom end caps. So you want to make sure that we have silicone or a sealant or a water-based substance in here, and in here. Don't mind if this gets on it, it's going to be covered up. But we're going to want to make sure we have a lot of sealant in here, all the way down into this area and in here as well. Once you have your sealant on, you're going to squeeze the end cap back on. There should be no gaps around. There should be silicone pouring out of these 2 holes once you put your 2 screws back in. And then you're going to want to screw the track back together with the 2 small countersunk stainless steel screws. Nice and tight. And then repeat the process on the sliding side. Again, silicone, this hole placement, and this hole. Squeezing back onto the end cap, and then screwing in the screws. This is okay for the movement of this, because later on we're going to be moving it, placing the jam on, and this needs to be able to slide. So if you do get a little bit of silicone on there, that's okay. Just make sure you don't go too far forward, but around this sort of area, 2 to 3 inches away from the end is perfect. Now that we have the jam connectors onto the track and the end caps sealed and siliconed, we can now place the track into the opening, back to where your pencil mark is, lining it up 1/2 inch from the end, 1/2 inch from this end, and centered to the opening. There will be pre-drilled holes in the bottom track and in the top track. So just align where your screw placement is. Setting one side. And now setting the other side. Once we have this track firmly secured into where it's going to sit, now we're going to check for where the level is. So this is where we're going to find our high spot. So I've screwed this side down, and I'm going to place my laser level on either right or left, and I'm going to shoot my laser from left to right, right to left, and I'm going to find out where my high spot is going to be. The reason why I want to find my high spot is just because that's where I'm going to work to. So if it was high in the middle, I would start off in the middle, and then I would bring my left side up to match the height of the middle, or I'd bring my right side up to match this. If my high spot was on the right, I would bring up the left side. If my high spot was low, I'd bring up the low side on the right. The reason why we ask for the inch on the RO is for this reason. So if you had a 1/2 inch out of level from right to left, and we needed to bring this up, we now have that inch gap up here that we can bring that track up. Tools that we're going to be using today, standard point laser. The laser level I love to use is a dot laser. It goes up and down. It will shoot a laser up and down, and it will shoot a laser across. That's the only kind of laser you can need or use. The line laser, they're good, but they don't get to an accurate state. So I do really recommend a dot laser, mallet, drill with the Phillips, 3/16 Allen wrench, pry bar, tape measure, and a speed level. Speed level is one of the most important things for the bottom track, as well as the laser level. If you spend your time on this part of the system and the installation of this is going to speed up the whole process. You spend enough time installing this track 100% level to the point of it's from left to right, a 1/16 perfectly level, everything else on the system will fall into place. So this is the lengthiest time that you want to spend on this, no less than an hour. You want to make sure that you go from left to right, right to left, back, forward, up and down, make sure this is 100% level. Once this is level, everything else just mirrors it, and it's all easy to install. So we're going to start off with the laser level, placing it onto the track. I like to make sure that my laser level lines up perfectly in line. You want to sit it just in front of our little pinhole on the system itself here, and then you want to shoot it all the way down the end. Using my speed level, I have marked off already where the level point is going to be. So I've taped off my speed level and calibrated it by placing it close enough to the system, the laser level itself. So now I know that this is level from here to here, and every screw position, I can just set my laser, making sure that it's level. As we can see, this track needs to go down, meaning this side of the system needs to come up. So I'm going to now level the bottom track, going screw point by screw point, and I'm going to be also leveling it, not just front to back, left to right, we're going to be front to back. This is why we use the speed level, so that if the system needed to be twisted or turned, I now have a bubble level that can actually spin the track. So if I needed to use shims to bring the track backwards, I can use shims to bring backwards. If I need to lift the whole system up, I can lift the system up. The shims that we're going to be using today, horseshoe shims. You can find these on Amazon. They're composite kind of shims, really easy to use. They are the thickness of the track. We use these. You get a stronger setting. It doesn't compress like wood, so they do sit perfectly under the track. Sometimes you might need to trim them, depending if you need the shim it to stick out. If I was to use the shim it on this side and only put halfway in, it would kind of bring that track down. So you can kind of manipulate the track itself. Some people like to use wood. I recommend not using wood and just using plastic for the bottom track. We like to use wood shims for the overall system. That way you can get a bit more of a cushion and compression. So starting off, I'm going to make sure that my track is actually level from front to back. Making sure that the actual track itself is within level. So we're good. Things to look out for when you are screwing in the bottom track is that these tracks are made from aluminum-based metal, which actually will pinch if you screw the screws too tight. Especially when you're going into wood, the screw can suck up and pinch. What I like to do is I like to take one of the bottom guides in the system. As I'm leveling each screw point, I will slide my guide, making sure that it's freely and easy to slide. Once we have a starting position, we're going to put the laser level to the opposite side, directly in the middle. Find our base level. And then hit every screw hole, making sure the track can go up and down. Finding where I'm going to be able to shim, where my high spot is, where my low spot. So this would be my high point of the track. So I'm going to leave my laser level, my speed level here. I'll bring the track up. With shims until I can see that my laser level is now perfect in line. So this was my low spot. This was my high pot. Now I've brought that track up. This is level. So within this point, from this shim to that part of the track, I can now shim all this way. There's no other high spots, no other, this is my high spot here. Screwing this back down. Making sure we're still in level. Over here. Back with the speed level. Another thing we can do with the horseshoe shims is we can break them in half, and we can use half the shim if we need to twist the track or bend the track. And again, moving our jam to make sure we're not too tight when we're screwing. Now I've got a position in, I know that that's my low spot brought back up. I can bring my laser level double checking my position. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to loosen our screw up over here. Having now the track free to be shimmed, and I'm going to work right to left, hitting every screw point, making sure that I shim accordingly. This is a good time to use your pry bar underneath the track system. A small amount of pressure is able to slide shims in. Remember, this will be on top of a sill pan. If this was an upstairs interior window, a sill pan would be underneath this track system, and you'd be shimming between the sill pan and the track itself. If this was on concrete, you would be shimming between the concrete and the track. And we'll be placing shims under every screw position. And remember, these are pre-drilled on the bottom and the top track. So I will make sure that I have a horseshoe shim under each screw position. Be careful when you're screwing, making sure that your screw is as directly as middle as you can. The worst thing you can do on an anodized track is if you would scratch the sides while you're screwing. This is the same as when you're going into the concrete. If you're pre-drilling into concrete, make sure you do a marker, remove the track, and then drill your hole through the concrete. So we're double checking again, point laser, as well as my bubble laser, making sure it's level there. The last position shouldn't have any shims underneath it, or it should have maybe one on the front or back if you needed to twist the system. Now my track, I think, is perfectly level. I'm going to turn the laser level off, place it down the opposite side, and I'm going to double check my work, going left to right. When we have a position where the swing door is going to be sat, this is where the pinhole is for the main door. I have screws here because this is where the pre-drill hole is, but there is no shims or a screw here. I would like to match the amount of shims I have underneath this part, because this is where the swing door and the jamb is going to be sitting. So not too much, but just enough to cushion it, so that when we apply the pressure of the jamb and the shims that will be sat on the top track pushing down, this part of the aluminum will not bow. So we now have shims underneath here, as well as the screw positioning. At this stage, this is where I would like to waterproof my system. Again, if this was a sill pan, I would remove all my screws, being very careful that the shims will not move. I would take up the track slowly, place the bottom track onto the table or onto your floor. Then I would run my bead of caulking, permethane, silicone, whatever you are using, and I would run it through the center line of the track, making sure that I'm running right through the middle and to where the screw holes are going to sit. I'd pick my track back up using the pencil lines that I drew on earlier, slowly placing the track system back down, lining up my screw position, and then screwing the track again. That's when I would really put my laser up. Once the track sat back down on top of the silicone, and I would run my laser and my speed level back through, making sure everything is level.